You can record as well. Hey friends, today I am really happy to have a beautiful woman. Her name is Carol May Whittick, and I bumped into her again on the social media platforms, Instagram this time. Not only does she have the funniest memes, everyone knows how my love for memes, but she has her own podcast called the Her Podcast. And she's also collaborating on the Great Awakening report, which was one of the main avenues that I used to actually go to, my go-to place back in March, April, May last year. But funnily enough, I couldn't find them. I think they got nuked on their social media channels. So it is my pleasure to have you here, Carol. How are you?
I'm good, Alpha. Thank you. Yeah, it's been great. And like what you're saying about social media, one, it's kind of like a nuke fest. It is like a battleground, really, to get the truth out. But similarly, even though so many of us who are out there kind of putting out the word, and sometimes you've got to do it, like you say, in a humorous way, or even like kind of like a dry way, just to get the message across a little bit in between all of those serious messages. So even though it's like a really testing ground because you'll get nuked, but in the same way, I've connected with so many new faces from all over the world. I know we're in the same spot, but we probably would not have connected had we been in the center of this situation. You know. And so what I'm finding is a real opportunity for like heart-centered connections and heart-centered work as well, which is, like you say, I collaborate with the Great Awakening report, and I wouldn't have found them if I hadn't been put so graciously on lockdown. So it works out, it works out, and collaborating with them means that I get to work in a completely different way. It's not about ego, it's not about one person being right, it's about looking at all the information. And as you surely know, in the truth community and the alternative news community, there is just a tsunami upon tsunami of information. We don't necessarily know who's who, but we have to use different skills in like discernment and thought in a way that we probably wouldn't with mainstream media. You just take what you've been told and you believe it. Here, you've got to kind of really assess how it hits you in your heart even, and just kind of allow people to be wrong, because over the year, it's been a real pressure on people to kind of get things right on dates, and this is going to happen and that's got to happen. But that's kind of not the time that we're moving into. It's a different energy and it's a different way of living, and we're all still figuring it out. We've never been here before. So
absolutely. And I like that. In fact, I have a confession. It was your voice that I heard on the Her podcast. And I thought, she sounds really sweet and gentle. And I agree, we are connecting with people that we would never connect with. And on that front, I'm really chuffed with that, because we're meeting like-minded individuals, kindred souls, and everyone's had a story. And people write into me with and share some real intimate stuff, like about what's happened to them, how I may have impacted their life just by standing up and being courageous. And I'm like, geez, like, I didn't even realize back at the time. And as my journey has evolved, I've become much more conscious as well that, wow, everybody has a story. We're all genuinely in this together, and connecting like this, like we have connected. We've had conversations privately, which we've just talked about so many things. And I'm like, Carol, make sure we remember this. This is a great subject. This is a great subject. And then what happens when we do the show? It's like, what was all those things we said that we were going to do? But I love the authenticity, especially with the Love and Action show with me, the Spiritual Badass, which I've called my show, particularly because that's exactly what all this is about, essentially. Love in action. So you're right, we haven't been here before. We don't have a manual. And I say this time and time again, it's repetitive on my shows, but it's absolutely right. We're navigating our way through this this timeline in the best way we can. And how are we doing that? That's what's important. So it's the observation of how people are, the information that's out there, and then using, as you said, the discernment. So, you know, your journey with the her podcast and the Great Awakening collaboration, talk to us a little bit more about that and your journey there.
So her conversations, that podcast actually was birthed in 2017, about 4 years ago almost now as well. And her is actually an acronym, so it stands for Higher Energetic Resonance.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. So I like to play with words as well, you know. And
everybody, did you hear that? Higher energetic
resonance.
Oh, yeah. Cool. That's amazing.
Yeah, so when I initially started, it was called Tools for the Awakening Woman. So I was just speaking to women within the spirituality, wellness space as well, which was fine, you know, because it really got me going. And as you know, when you start putting out content, there's so many skills to learn that you forget. You know, it's not just turning up and pressing play. There's a lot that you have to do. It's things that you really have to hone within yourself. So that's how that started. And then towards the midpoint of last year, I'd say like August sometime, I just wanted to have a little bit of a shake up and a rebrand. And I decided for it to still be Her Conversations, but to be Tools for the Awakening, so that I wasn't just specifically going for women.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that it also was about the awakening as opposed to the awakening woman. So, you know, I wanted to just start to speak to men. I just kept the byline because I have a little bit of a speech that I put at the beginning of each one that I wrote 4 years ago, that with, you know, just with a few tweakings to make it inclusive, is pretty much exactly the same. Yeah. So that's been running, and I slowed down over last year as well. So I put out maybe twice a month, more than 4 times a month, because I don't know, I just found that I needed to start to speak to people who were aware of what was happening in whatever shape or form, and then were using their skills to actually add to that as well. And one of the things that was surprising to me, that was within the spiritual community, not everyone was seeing it, or they were getting kind of caught up in their political bent to not see what was going on. So that was a huge surprise to me as well. So I had to take back and go, I thought certain people, because they presented themselves in a certain way, would just get it instantly, and that was not the truth.
Yeah.
And then at the beginning of lockdown, I'd say like March, April, almost instantly, I was watching a podcast from somebody else that I'd interviewed like years before, and she touched on certain truths over the periods of times where I'd been like, I don't know, you know, and I'm an open mind, but she'd kind of gone to a certain point where I was just like, I don't know. And I took a step back from her. But then when all of this happened, I'm like, there's something going on. It's not just about what's being presented. There's a shift in something. There's an opportunity. Exactly. And so I was just listening to one of her podcasts, and she then said, oh, I watched this. I go to this website, the Great Awakening Report. And of course, with me having awakening in my podcast, and then I'm like, oh, that sounds good.
Yeah.
So I went to their website. I really liked their website. I signed up for their newsletter to get their weekly report.
Yeah.
And then at the bottom of one of their emails, I saw that they were looking for people. And I just sent a message and just said, you know, I would like to lend my skills. Yeah. And it's been a year now. So what happens is weekly, what we do is basically we aggregate and look at all the information that's out there. So from the geopolitical end all the way through to spirituality and path of awakening, and in between then true history and weather and health and all of that kind of stuff. So it's a report that covers everything, but it's the alternative side of stuff.
Right.
And it's not that we're writing any of it really. It's what we're doing is we're looking at the landscape and putting it all in one place. Because when you start on this journey, you just go online and go,
I loved it.
What website do I start with? Yeah. Who is telling the truth or not? You know, that's how I correlate the two basically as well. And it's been a great eye-opener for me, because I've collaborated
so much.
Yeah, because also the managing director, Mark, has been on this journey of research and truth for 30 years. Wow. So he knows his stuff like 100%. So I'm totally a student, even though I've been dipping in and out of this for a long time. I'm totally learning new stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's very extensive. I implore
Mm.
everyone to go. I mean, I'm sure loads of people know about it. And in fact, that's what I actually wanted to do right at the start, because I had collated a lot of information, literally was frying my brain. I was researching 8 to 9 hours a day. Even I can't remember half of the stuff, and I had it all on my phone, and that phone got stolen, and I didn't back it up. And I had all the folders, everything in sort of categories about the subject to do with the children. Then what I started to learn on the geopolitical side of things, then sort of the galactic stuff, then the spiritual stuff, and into sort of twining it all and connecting it. It made sense to me immediately, not having been a very well-read person about any of these subjects. It instantaneously made sense through life experiences. So by the time I got to this awakening, I felt, right, there were some real prominent people that were speaking out right at the start, and Great Awakening was one of them. And it was the go-to place for, right, everything is there. And there were some other Instagram accounts that all have been taken down.
Yeah.
And they were really, really good. So people, when I started sharing it on my Facebook earlier on, Alpa, you've got great information. It was like, hey, listen, guys, it's not me. I'm someone that collaborates too. I like just to share the information and pass it on. And obviously I would read about it. It's exhausting, the research, and I didn't maintain it, in all fairness. Then I went back inward and started connecting with my kind of higher self and intuitively navigating myself. But there is people that will do the research right now, as we've had conversations in private, Carol, that there is a still a very pressing problem where which side people are on, and the divide is very clear. How has it been for you in your communities, with your family, within your social groups? You know, what have you faced from awakening so like rapidly back in March and to where you are now?
Well, I would say that I've always been the black sheep of the family. So this kind of, like, you know, being the odd one out and the one that people don't get and the one that's just talking about everything that nobody agrees with has kind of been like my life's position, to be honest. So and then what really solidified everything for me last year is I realized that all these different areas that I had an awareness of have been things I've been looking at for my lifetime, 20 odd years or so, not to say I'm 20, but you know what I mean, 20 odd years or so of just kind of reading books, being aware of certain things, kind of taking the time looking into like extraterrestrial disclosure, looking into like geophysical, looking into historical events, looking into all of that stuff. And one of the ways that I would suggest as well, because you know you always want to have that folder and that kind of file of breaking it down, is if you get one of the maps, like a Great Awakening map or the Deep State map or something like that, and just kind of get a, you know, you can download a copy from the website actually for free. If you start to take a look at that, you'll probably see like areas that you've been looking at over certain times, and you'll see it laid out, and it's been laid out brilliantly, and you can then see how that would relate to your own story. You're like, oh, I've heard of that, or I read an article about that, or that made sense. So there's always been this kind of burning, like a little bit of like cynicism is what has come towards me. I've always questioned things, but not really known what to do with those questions. So things, big events would happen in the world that, you know, when you take time to really look at them, you realize they were orchestrated. And at the time you're like, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't seem real. And then when you kind of really understand the structure of the world that we're living in and how you have to reform your outlook on everything, and how you have to be able to sit with a myriad of version of events, don't be held on to one thing being solid. It might be a better version of events, it might not be the truth, but it might be something closer to it. And at the moment, like anyone who's paying attention knows that anything that's coming out of the mainstream channels is probably the opposite of what is fact. And in particular, I know that you went up, I know I didn't see you, but over the past months, there's been massive rallies in London, and there's been no peep of it in the news. So if they can ignore the fact that hundreds of thousands of people,
millions now, it was a 3.4 million. That was
is that the number? Wow.
There's been many people saying, many pundits saying that, you know, confirmed that it has been over 3 million. So the accurate amount, it's I can't say, but definitely over 2 million for sure, 100%.
And well, you've just got to look at something simple like that. Is that if they can lie about that, what else is it possible that they could lie about?
This is the thing. This is what really baffles me. And I kind of sit here and I think that they're seeing information, they're seeing these videos on people's social media. It's not like they're blind, but there is that sort of attachment to and reliance on what the mainstream media relay, and they believe that even if they've seen proof. So, you know, this is a growing problem now for humanity, because it's now, okay, before conspiracy theories that we were just all being labeled that, but now we're presenting factual information, and there's still that hesitation to actually say, yeah, okay, that's right. I encounter it on a daily basis. So, you know, and this reluctance to want to know. So where do we go from here now? Where do we go from here?
I mean, like, to kind of respond to what you said before, that hesitancy, I think for a lot of people who, I truly believe that everyone has like an inkling of something, like something's up, something up. Whether they respond to it is their choice. And especially if they see how people who are speaking an alternative view are getting treated, do they really want to go into that band? But it's about, again, coming back into self and building your strength up personally, because you're going to have to admit at some time you're going to have to let go of that ego that you thought you were right, and the person that you believed to be telling you the truth was telling you the truth, and finding that out, and then not knowing what that's going to do to your world. Because it's one thing to to really admit to the fact that you've been lied to, but then it means that everything is in question and things are going to come crumbling down. You know, people who've had PhDs and degrees and have held on to those letters after their name might find that in the course of time, what they've spent thousands of pounds on doesn't actually stand for the truth, the reality of something, and it's been an expensive indoctrination. And also, when it comes to learning the truth, you've got to think we spend at least the first 10-15 years of our life in school, like a full-time job. You've got hours and hours and hours and hours of information impacted on that, and then within that we get trained to, like, the bell goes and it's time for us to eat, and then the bell goes and it's time for us to go home. That is embedded in people pretty much all in the Western world anyway. So to then undo that, and especially when you move away from like a structured job where I did, and started to move into something that's more self-employed, there's still like a little bit in the back. You're looking at the time going, well, should I be getting up now? Should I be doing that? You have to start to build that self-discipline that you don't get taught how to do it. You get taught how to respect authority or believe authority. So it's part of us also growing up and maturing as a species, as humanity. So when we also start to take personal responsibility for all of the choices that we've made, then we'll be able to stand up against it. And a lot of people are still caught in that, you know, you're just caught in a different stage. You're just caught in that kind of maybe pubescent area where you're like still holding on to things, but you're not ready to step into that next space.
Yeah, well, it's that subordination and that acquiescing that has been ingrained into their psychological makeup. And I understand that. And I was in the park earlier on today, and there's a lot of Indian people in my area, and I just observe where people are at, you know, mentally, emotionally. Breaks my heart seeing old people in the park wearing masks still. See, they're not privy to the information as we are. They don't feel prone to looking onto the internet and researching. They literally have one avenue for information, which is the news. And my father, if it wasn't for me, my father would have been that way. I've had to really assert myself and say, Dad, please listen to me. And he finds it really difficult because he's been someone that just sits and watches the news all day. And it's great because he thinks he's got this kind of real worldly knowledge, and it's really cute. And I absolutely adore listening to him. But when I've had to break down what was in the masks, for example, and everything else that's been going on with the narrative, he said to me yesterday, actually, Carol, he goes, I don't understand what you're doing, but I'm listening to you. My heart like nearly broke. Like I was crying inside. I thought, wow, this is my father. There's a lot of my fathers out there. They're lovely, well-meaning people. And the older community, like they don't know how to, right? It's the younger generation that are privy to information. So let's take a conversation that we had on the phone about how everybody was capable here in the UK. This is just here in the UK and America, to make a noise about Black Lives Matter. And all my friends that well, I was screaming about the children stuff simultaneously at the same time that whole subject erupted. And I was just observing to see not one person would say anything about the children, not one from people that I knew, about the horrific and heinous crimes against children. Yet there was a capability to go to rallies for a person that I don't personally believe had, how do I say this? Like he was convicted 50 times of beating his wife, girlfriend, sorry, a drug addict, in and out of prison. And we are observing that memorials were being made for him and in his name. Now, obviously on this conspiratorial side, I was getting really annoyed by this, because Black lives do matter. The children in Haiti that got kidnapped, the Black lives in Sudan, you know, all of these things that were not getting the correct and right information, the right exposure, yet we are now seeing the whole world go crazy and rallies happen over that. So this was right at the start last year as well. I think it would have been a year ago exactly that this started happening. So I was observing that, especially in our communities, that everyone I knew from the Indian community were really in support of that. Great, because every life matters. And I was getting vilified for just putting that up, putting all lives matter. How was that for you, and you being on this side, coming from that community? How have you handled that?
Well, firstly, I didn't see that incident happen, but when it happened at that point, I was like, I'm not surprised that something like that happened, because there were a series of events that because I was spending so much time looking at the political kind of games that were being played at this time last year. So you could see what certain people were saying, you could see what was being promoted online in terms of this is important, this person said that. And it was kind of really amping up the angst, particularly within the Black community. And because racism and because Black pain in itself has been so weaponized, and then not being allowed to heal at any point in time, it's just easy to just trigger that and get people back in their feelings again, and not able to kind of stand back and go, hang on a moment, are we being played here? And that's how I feel about it. I mean, there were like a couple of situations where I saw Black women kind of just there were some things where I was just like, I had to kind of step away from, or ask someone to not contact me, because what they wanted to keep sending was Black people supporting this person in politics, and they've sold out and all this kind of stuff, and if they don't go this way then they're not Black, and this person's a racist and they're part of Ku Klux Klan and all of this stuff. And I'm like, I don't really think much of that is true. However, you know, please don't contact me with any more of that. And they got really upset about it. Also, there was a meme that was going on. I think the masks had just started to be worn as well. And I saw someone react really badly to that, because that obviously then you have the visual of the slaves who are wearing that as well. So you correlate that. So also there's that image that's been pushed for decades within the Black community, and then when people are correlating people wearing it on the streets, if you're not trying to see what someone's trying to say, you're just going to go, how dare you disrespect my ancestors? We're talking about black pain here. So those were encounters that I had from on the black side. But I just hate saying it like that. But also what I was seeing within the community. This wasn't my personal experience, but it was someone relayed it back to me who does healing circles for women of color, that within that sector was being carved. So unless you were like this color, then you could be with it, but if you were like a certain shade lighter, then you couldn't be allowed into that space. So it started to like carve and cause division in so many layers within that. This is just this whole thing, because everyone was responding to it in such a different way. And then I had white friends who went into the freeze mode, you know, so you had kind of the attack of the black community going into that fight and flight mode, and then on the white side, white friends were just like, I don't know what to say, I don't know what to do, I don't want to upset anyone, so they went into that mode. So it was trauma on both sides. And I think it's I don't know how we go about healing it, but I think one of the ways to start is to pull back and go, we're being played here, is to notice that we're being played here. And when you can see the game, then you can't be played anymore. But if you're still in the pain that the game is giving you, then you're just going to keep reacting to the pain. And that is when I just pulled away from it, and I just thought, you know, what if I just don't buy the program anymore, don't buy the race program? Because some of the things that I see, if I'm kind of looking at the observer of things, the people who keep reminding me of how bad I have my life are black people who are living a very nice life. Then, you know, they're not suffering, they're not oppressed financially, they have inroads in the best of everything.
This is absolutely a very fundamental and important point that you've just said, that right now we are in a civilized society in humanity for having had conditions where oppression was there, where racism was there. But right now, does it exist to the extent that the media has portrayed within this last year? We all know that the propaganda behind this on this side, having done the research on the geopolitical arena, I understand that. I get what's going on. It's just observations now. And I cast my mind back to that time of this George Floyd movement. And it was there where I had a heavy heart, where I thought that this was unnecessary. Of course, we know why this happened, but where is humanity? Is humanity going to go backwards from this particular movement? And it's causing of course, we know it's the divide and rule, and it's causing these like intertwined, unnecessary, low vibrational issues within society that need not exist today, because we're not repressed anymore. And these are old Marxist ideologies that are still carrying forward just by the cabal, and we know why. But humanity has to wake up and make that decision and say, yes, we are being played here. We are a long way from that, I feel, at the moment, until there is some exposure to a like big degree, like in the news, and every news channel is saying, yep, we got played and the white hats are in control. But that doesn't seem like it's happening. We're being drip fed very subliminally what's going on. We have the eyes to see it, but what I feel now, and over a year in, I'm like in that hope and in that vanity, thinking that people are going to wake up. That hasn't happened. So the reality here, as we said on the phone, let's call a spade, that these are kind of the issues that still exist within our communities. So that I spoke about this, like thought of you actually yesterday in an interview with the Spiritually Raw. Before I was reluctant to, because I don't want to ever come across as disrespectful to any community, but there is that inner sort of hesitancy about how do we address this? Well, no, let's call a spade, because a year in, I would have thought the Indian community would have been a bit more awake. I know everything's happening within time, but when I observed that everyone I know from my background took the Jabberwocky, that's when I thought, right, this is so deep, and we have a growing problem here, because there is that reluctance to even want to listen to you. Forget about seeing the facts. It's just a plain right, I don't want to hear it. It's just you're full of crap.
Mm.
It's that sort of ego that is there that needs to be taken down. And we're in that part, we're in those timelines now, the collapse of all these old structures, these old ways, the narcissistic paradigms that are falling apart and crumbling before our eyes. But it's going to be a process. Is that going to happen by the end of this year? No, let's just get rid of timelines.
Right.
There is the fractured there is a wound in humanity now from this that we need to heal from alone, not forgetting all the other wounds and all the other traumas and all the other generational traumas. This has started a new wound, and we don't really truly know what's going to happen as a result of the V, right? We really don't. We're speculating here, and we're listening to a lot of doctors, and we are sort of saying that, okay, these ingredients aren't great, etc. But we really truly don't know what's happening. We are seeing and observing right now. So from where I am, we have a fair way to go within our communities, for sure.
And I think, I was the same as you, going, surely a year in, and everyone's got sick and tired of it. It will just be like waking up and light bulbs go off. But awakening doesn't necessarily happen like that. I'm sure it didn't happen like that for me. It was just like a kind of like little bit. And it took me years to really get to the point where, one, I even needed to speak up and out against anything. I didn't know why I was being shown this information, but I just always kind of had an idea that there was an alternative view of stuff, but the world was going that way. So it's like, what's the point in knowing? But if you don't have that, and also if you've built up your personality, your life, your community, your social stature, everything on this paradigm, even though there are people on the other side that are telling you it's falling to bits, and even if you can start to see it's falling to bits, it's going to be a hard thing, because most people truly believe that if there's no government, or if there's no one that they answer to, that there'll be anarchy in the streets, that people are not self-regulating. And I beg to differ on that. It might take a moment for us to kind of find our way. And yeah, like if we had something like everyone kind of got all the money that we were all due, yeah, there'd be some people that would be irresponsible, but you'd find a balance eventually. And the same way, if there was no structure of government, if we, I always think, like, what would happen if someone went to turn the TV on and it just didn't come on, and the radio didn't come on, and then your mobile phone wasn't working? Where would you go? What would you do? How would you form your day? What would you think about? Like, would you be in a panic, or would you, what would start to do? Because then we would need to start looking locally and actually looking at what we can contribute on a smaller level. Absolutely. And just looking after ourselves on that internal level. If you didn't have all of that information coming in, then you'd spend time just contemplating, and you might come up with something new and have a deeper conversation with anybody.
Yeah. I think one main fundamental trauma that we have as humanity is, what will people think? Yeah. And it's not just from my community or this community, that community. It's just generic. Right. It's really keeping up with the Jones. Unfortunately, humanity went towards a very consumerist society and materialistic societies, and I just observed that people are so attached to their titles as opposed to actually figuring out who they are internally. So that's fine, because they're all in the trajectory of their own soul, and who am I to judge? But this is the wound of where we start to dissipate that wound of what will people think, then, and standing in your sovereign being of truth. That's when things start to move and shift in terms of frequency and energy. I can attest to that. I say this all the time. I did not like speaking about this, or I wouldn't have even had the confidence 2 years ago, because I just didn't have any interest in politics, for example. I didn't have any idea about what was going on. I was so asleep, comatose about what was going on geopolitically, because I just stayed away from it. I didn't watch the news. I realized now that was something that was actually powerful for me, because I wasn't consuming So that's why I say it's such a consumerist society everywhere we go. You know, we're so overly consumed by too many things. So what you said is that when we become collectively smaller if we didn't have the phone, if we didn't have the internet, if we didn't have the news or TV, we would have to learn a new way of being. And this is that undoing. We've got to go back to that basics. But psychologically, where people are right now, there's confusion, there is a lot of anger, and there's a lot of pain, because once we get to the other side of this, it's what I want to focus on on my show, The Love in Action, is the how to, and how can we actually empower, encourage, and evolve our brothers and sisters together. We can talk about things as a matter of fact without feeling scared of, am I going to say the wrong thing, or am I going to address it incorrectly because of race or gender, or all this nonsense that's going on in the US with cancel culture. You know, we need to sort of call a spade and be able to say, right, like, without worrying about being censored or your channel going. But we are having to navigate our way through these times, and it's actually growing us individually, because there's one way to go downhill, or you choose to evolve. There's usually only two choices. So when we start looking through the lenses of being happy and being optimistic, not from a false sense of hopium, but like, what can I control in my reality right now? And what can I do to make the change? Not everybody's going to like listen to me, and that's okay. Not everyone's going to be on the same page, and there doesn't need to be that I need to wake everyone up. So this responsibility. Saturday was a testament for myself as well. I had tears coming down my eyes, like in happiness, that this is a revolution. We're living through some times that, if you have the eyes to see it, it's phenomenal.
Yeah, I think it's historical. And the thing is, it's something that you maybe can't even, because we've never lived through this. This is the stuff that you read about in history books, that, you know, the people took to the streets, and or with a friend that one of the friends that I was with, she was there when the walls came down in Germany. So she was just a young child, and she remembered. And even when she was like just recalling the chant that they were doing, I'm not even going to go there with the German, but she was like, oh my God, I just got goosebumps from it. So you just remember what it's like. And I remember I only started to go to a few of the rallies in August of last year, and to see the growth in terms of numbers. Like the first few ones, we went and we came away and we felt better. And then we'd be like, well, is it making a difference? Does anyone care? You know, because each of us individually were trying to just have conversations with people, going, look at this, and not even trying to pull them down a rabbit hole or anything, just go, none of this stuff that we're going through is making sense. None of this this virus, or none of the, and it was just on the cusp of the whole, you know, the jab stuff, so we hadn't even got there yet. So none of what is happening is making sense. And of course, like the cloud was always at that time over the geopolitical, and in particular the American geopolitical.
That was very important.
So yeah, I mean, it woke people up, because it got people to take a look and take a stand at things, and also appreciate that maybe what you thought was going on was not the truth. Maybe, especially in particular, if we want to go back to race, is to say that all you have to do is kind of call someone a racist, and you decide that you hate them, you don't want to hear anything about them. And this is not to just like fly the flag for Donald Trump, but look at it this way. He was the one that came out and started to talk about alternative therapies, and no one wanted to hear it, simply because it came out of his mouth. Exactly. And yet a year later, it turns out he was speaking the truth. Yeah. So then we have to look at, it's like, we get figures put in front of us, we're told they're this way and that way, either good or bad, that they're speaking the truth or they're speaking lies to us, and we go along with it. based on our emotion and based on our reaction to something. And like you say, with politics, it's not necessarily that you're going to have to go and like delve into the history of politics, but have an understanding of the structure of things, have an understanding of the structure of the power structures and the people that, and the people that we get presented as our leaders may not necessarily be the ones who are that. You know, television in itself is an entertainment tool. That's what it's actually listed as. It's listed as entertainment. So we have to wonder why we're looking for our information from something that is patented to entertain us and steer us in one way or another. But it comes down to starting to work out what it is that you want for yourself in terms of what does a happy life mean without stuff. What does feeling happy mean? What does truth feel like to you? Even like peeling it back to that, it's like, what, you know, when you hear something and you're like, oh my God, you know, you get that feeling. Go back to that. But we're so desensitized because we are poisoned every which way, mentally, internally, with our food, emotionally, everything. And then also we get told that this is where we should be at a certain point in life. So if we're not hitting those markers, then we feel like a failure. So that's that external carrot that we're chasing that we rarely ever meet. You know, there are so many stories of people who hit success markers and yet are just miserable. So that can't be it.
No, because we're not taught to go inside. It's always outside. And I like what you said, that this movement is teaching us to make a stand for something, because we may not have been so aware, let's say, about the geopolitical, like I said, and I say time and time again, I just wasn't interested, but intuitively my higher self was rejecting all of this. I'm so grateful to like be awake. I know I can't emphasize that enough, that I thank the divine every single day that, okay, I may not have had the most amazing experiences for the first half of my life, and but those were all there to serve a purpose as teachers for me to stand and in my sovereignty and in my certainty in this fight and quest for truth. Now I'm seeking truth. You and I say this, we don't have all the answers, we're seeking truths. These labels that we attach to this community, the truth, the community, this community, look, we're all trying to find our way, and that is it. Let's not have this attachment mentality. Let's figure out the facts. We know there's nefarious stuff that's been happening at every single establishment in every single country. We get that. We go and look at who's actually really in power. That's what we did. The people that are not looking at that, very rightly said, they're desensitized. And what is the approach, the good approach, the nice approach? Nothing worked really with a lot of people, I found. But then you have to sort of home into what is it doing for you, and how are you growing in this? Because this is teaching you, and ultimately you're just responsible for self and the evolution of your soul. And everyone watching my journey from the beginning, I was like really excitable. I really thought that, you know, this is a revolution, and this time next year such and such is going to happen. Put my hands up. You know, I've grown so much. I didn't even know what was meant for this journey for me. I've come out of financial services. I lost my job. I'm actually not working. It's 6 months of me just doing this. So I'm figuring my own stuff out, but I'm happy to do that, because it feels like a calling for me now. And it feels congruent with the purpose of my soul and what I'm meant to be doing here. But it is frightening for a lot of people, because the change is always disturbing for people when they're so used to doing the same thing over and over again, because it becomes that bot-like mentality, and that then provides them that fear. False evidence appearing real, you know, it gives them that fear ultimately in a pseudo type of way of comfort, if that makes sense. So they're attaching to this fear-based programming, which they think is guised as their comfort zones. But essentially, like, if you don't ascribe to this title, if you don't achieve those grades, if you don't become married by a certain age, if you don't do this, oh my God, you won't be fitting into society. And like you said earlier on, being the black sheep of the family, I'm the different, unique one in my family. That's the way I look at it, because I didn't get married like a good Indian girl should do by a certain age. I didn't have the children, not because I didn't want to. Don't get me wrong. I did want that. I wanted that so much. I wanted children from a very young age. Like I always saw myself having 6. However, it didn't happen for me. And now I realize why. Because some of these relationships that I had, I'd be like, oh my God, we would have so got like in this situation, because, you know, I think very differently. So when we draw upon our experiences in gratitude, no matter how negative they are, because the crisis essentially then turns into a blessing for you and as a catalyst for you to take righteous action, conscious action, loving action. So, you know, it's wonderful and magnificent when you see it. But when you come as an observer, and you see everything that's happening from observation. And one of the things that I really, really love about this journey is meeting the people who have beautiful qualities like yourself, which is why I was like, when I emailed you, I want to speak to you. I really want to speak to you because I don't know what it is. It's something that pulls me, draws me. There's so many pundits in this movement say, oh, why haven't you spoken to this person? Why haven't you spoken to this one, this person? There's many people out there now saying the same thing about what's going on in the geopolitical. I want to hear people's stories. You know, I want to hear about what they're doing, you know, and their ways of ascending or evolving and all of that. So, you know, the things that you've shared are brilliant. And the stuff that everyone, I'll put the details down below in the description where to find Carol, but it's perception, isn't it? And hearing other people's perception about this journey and how they navigate themselves through it is nothing but helpful, I think.
Yeah, and you know, and all of the things that you talked about is like, you know, and I think probably the pressure is like harder in the Asian community to like hit those boxes, but it's still there anyway. And within me or within my community to be like, well, you know, why you're not married yet? Why don't you have a house? Why haven't you got children? Why do you want to keep traveling around the world and like going and staying in all these like crazy places and doing all these different things? But it's in the same way as well. My early life was challenging. I met with probably like deeper, like strong challenges that would have taken certain people out. And at the time I didn't realize, because I just had to get on with just getting on and moving forward. And then standing at this point and looking back, I'm like, well, thank God I don't have children at this point, you know, because the parent that I intend to be in the future will be much more rounded. And I, you know, there's always going to be an element of error because I've never done it before, so it's a new thing. But I truly believe that the parent that I will be in the future will just be more patient, more understanding, more able to guide, and more able to allow that child to be themselves in the world, and also to allow myself to keep working on things, because I was very much guided by a lot of the things that I didn't want. So a lot of my things, I don't want to do that, I don't want to do that, I don't want to do that. So it was, I had some goals, but then also as I was wanting to break a lot of patterns that I saw around me, because there are a lot of very strong women, and a lot of women in the Black community will attest to this, that there's a lot of strength in the elder generation.
Yes.
But because they had to come and just do and be and fight against all of these structures of discrimination, and a lot of the time as well to do it on their own, they had to abandon a lot of things that we have the pleasure of actually sitting in and exploring. So exploring femininity, exploring sensuality, exploring healing, and looking back at like patterns, generational patterns, and the ones of us that are trying to take this exploration and look at this work, we're not only doing it for ourselves, we're doing it for our mothers, our aunties, our grandmothers, our great grandmothers, and then also for our daughters and our sons in front of us. So it's interesting that we're at this pivotal point in time, because we're seeing so much happen externally, but then also we're really being given the push internally. And just another thing that came to me when we're talking about just ego and wanting to kind of get the message to awaken people is sometimes as well, and I thought about this, is like you always want to kind of be the one that wakes someone up, and you say that thing and the bulb goes off and they swallow the red pill. It's like, it's not like that.
No,
your job is just your job is to leave a crumb, and it might be, you know, someone else has to put it all together. And part of that also is an ego for us.
Absolutely.
You want to be the one, you want to be the one that someone texts you, go, oh my God, Carol, you told me this, I see it all now. We've got
I woke up to that very quickly. And I woke up to that very quickly because I just had a naive understanding that this is going to happen. And then they're going to be, oh my God, Alpa, like, you know, this is terrible. And how did I not see this before? No, I had a reality check right at the start. I could see straight away that it's not I can plant seeds. I get the frustrations. There's a difference, and observe my frustration. That's my ego speaking.
Right.
So we have to take a reality check of self all the time. I can see myself getting really annoyed. I say, Alpa, check yourself. You're being an absolute, you know, bitch. Excuse my French. Yeah. I'm like, don't be like that. See, I spoke to my mum, and I get the frustrations along this journey, and, you know, I'm honest about them as well, because I want to dissipate them. I want to dissolve them, because I want to, you know, absolve that ego, and I want to work towards that to the best of my capacity. Do I get it right at all? Sometimes? No, not at all. I get it wrong very, very much of the time. And I said to my mum the other day, I said, Mum, you know, XYZ about what's going on. She just said, Alpa, you're just talking about it all the time. Like, it's too much for me. And then she sat down. I said, Mum, would you speak on my show? She goes, oh, maybe one day I'll think about it. But she goes, you've got to understand, for me, I don't understand these things. I don't get it. She goes, this is a bit too abrasive for me. She didn't use that word, but for her, what she was trying to say, it was too much. It was too much. She couldn't handle it. It was creating more anxiety in her. And when she said that, I realized that, oh my God, what I'm trying to do with a good intention is actually not coming across in that way. And that was only at home with her, because I was so scared about her getting the jab, and my dad too, that I was just thinking about how I would feel on the other side if anything happened to them. Of course, it's love, care, but oh my God, attachment. And hats off to both my parents. And I say this time and time again, that it's not been easy dealing with me in this madness. I put my hands up, you know, and I said, Mum and Dad, I love you so much that while you haven't understood what's gone on, that's where I try to employ that respect to our elders, that, you know, we speak to them with politeness, or what we say in Gujarati, sabhyata and sanskar, you know, a sense of decorum. Because when you get angry in this movement, and I'm seeing this happen so much, which is why I moved away from a lot of this so-called truth community, because of all this that was happening. And that's not something that I want to gravitate towards, because it's deviating us from concentrating and focusing on the revolution itself, for us to evolve and ascend. So if we are carrying on with that behavior, which has tainted our world, like, for example, the mainstream media and that trashy, like, low vibrational way of reporting news, you know, and in that condescending, patronizing way, which make people feel paranoid and, you know, defensive, so subliminally that we don't even realize it's happening. Do we carry on in that behavior? Do we start trolling people unnecessarily in this community? And that's what I saw was happening. And it was making me stand back. And I think when I wasn't well for a while, I really realized that this is not the way I want to speak to people. This is not the way that I want people who resonate with me I want people to feel crap after seeing one of my shows. I want them to feel empowered, encouraged, and they feel that they've got something where they've evolved from my guests. And it's to nourish them. But we talk about situations and we call a spade, like you said. We speak about it, and we articulate ourselves with grace and dignity and that sense of decorum, not in this cat fighting way that the cabal have taught us to behave like. So it's happening in the truth of community. And I saw someone effing and blinding. Don't get me wrong, I use profanities here and there, no saint for sure. However, What are we teaching people? If we've taken the stance, and plucked up the courage to do this, to say, right, I don't have the answers, but hey, this is an illusion, everything that we've been living. It's the way we approach it. So definitely so many things that we learn within ourselves, our inner journey here. And I think it's wonderful that I've connected with people like yourself. I took some nuggets of wisdom from your podcast. I listened to it. The queen of memes, they're funny. My friend Madonna and I send them like every 5 minutes because it's humor and that sense of like, okay, well, it's going to be okay. Everything is perfect the way it's meant to be.
And just to respond to what you're saying about how people will kind of present themselves when they're presenting alternative news, I think we have to be really conscious of the responsibility that we have when we come forward, because we're not just kind of like throwing up YouTube channels and doing vlogs around our house. We're actually trying to bring some really important and potentially life-changing information and thoughts and guidance, really. I don't want to say advice, because I'm just kind of like leading by the best example that I can do. It's also on us to look at where people have come from and look at the toxicity of the mainstream media, where it is about fear and shame and guilt and just like this, look what's happening and you're not doing this, and blame, and just, you know, if you're not doing that, then you're causing this one problem and everything. If we're going to come forward with information or bring people to voice things, even voice difficult things, our responsibility as voices who have decided that we're going to be out there is also to work probably doubly hard on ourselves. And it's not the easiest of things to do, and it's work. Like, you know, like one of the things is like, for all the people that want to call themselves light worker, just remember there's work in there, and work is work. You know, it's not just the kind of love and light and floating around on things.
Definitely not.
It's we have to look at what we're addressing at this moment. We're addressing like real 100% evil in the world at the moment, and that is a big thing for people to take on board, which is why I feel they're like, you're saying, what about children? It's like, no, you know, it's just it's just easier to go, that's not true, than take it on board and understand the reality of what that actually really means, and what lives and how we have been culpable as a result of that ignorance. And that is also a responsibility that we need to sit with as well, because we didn't want to look at politics, we didn't want to look at that, we didn't want to look at that. So by that token, by turning away and thinking it was too much, then they were allowed to create and carry on with all sorts of stuff. So in order for us to defeat evil, transcend evil, awaken to the evil, we need to face it. We need to look it in the eye and understand what it is, but also have belief in ourselves that we're strong enough to look at it and not be consumed by it or drawn into it. And if I think of my own journey, it's gone full circle. I was born in the church, and I've kind of come back, as particularly just looking at Bible verses and speaking to friends about this, which has been interesting because I've kind of gone through many different modalities, and just being able to look at the world through verses in that give you guidance without falling down the road of dogma and the religion and all of that kind of stuff, and that savior mentality that is embedded in many of the religions as well. So we all individually have to kind of really work on ourselves, whether we've got a YouTube channel or podcast, or whether we're just the person within our family that just won't shut up about it. We just, I know. Yeah, it's honest to always find our own balance, and to take a moment to be like, was that the kindest way that I could have delivered that?
Oh God, you know? I have that every single day, because when I read about, say, someone who may have died, or there's this unfairness, or there's this injustice, and straight away that kind of warrior mode comes in play with me, and I can shoot my mouth. Like, on like my stories on WhatsApp, because I'm blocked on Facebook and everything else, they're not letting me put things on, so I'm like, and I know that my family's going to see it, right? So I make sure, because it's like they're the ones who've been like they don't want to listen, they don't want to know, they don't want to, but they're the greatest teachers, because it propelled me to speak out even further, to do what I do, to do what you do. You know, it's not the easiest. However, and I don't need a medal for it, and neither do you. However, it is, you're very right in saying it is a position of responsibility, and we are just sharing information. It's important to kind of have that disclaimer as well for people to look, see what resides well with you internally. Learn to like get to know the rhythm of your own soul. Learn to know what resonates to you. Learn to work the solar plex and that intuitive compass that we have been gifted with. You know, let's try and work with a higher power. Let's work this third dimensional sort of illusion that we have been taught to believe, that the esoteric world has just been diluted. And that's the wisdom that I have been brought up on myself. And it's learned from myself. Like I've taken nuggets from people, but it's, sorry, I say that, said that incorrectly. I've learned from people, and it's that willing myself to learn from other people, that what I am today, I am, like I've learned from those experiences. Do we have all the answers? Heck no. Will I have to be born a few more lifetimes? I hope not. But you know, I do sort of have a familiarity with a lot of people. Like I recognize you. Then I start questioning recently, very recently, is when I start getting this kind of elated feeling around a lot of people. And I do, because this soul tribe is coming together. And I just feel, I love you so much. And it's like, my mum's like, oh, you love everybody. And I'm like, the truth is, I recognize you. Something seems familiar about you. I don't know what it is, but it's like, that's the same thing with you. There's so many people on this journey where I'm like, I know you from somewhere, and it's this journey of remembering. And that's what I feel we're on, to figure out where, you know, who we are and why we're here.
Exactly. And it's not based on like what you got or what clothes you got, what school you went to. It's a realer thing. And it really, the last episode of the podcast that I did was actually talking about the May protest. And I put a little clip from a nun in there, and YouTube pulled it down because like they didn't like what she was saying, basically. But one of the points that I raised in that was the fact that when I was on the way into town, I got on the train and I just started speaking to people whose faces I could see. And we didn't even, it wasn't until they were going that I was like, oh, what's your name? You know, we didn't even want to know what each other's name was. We just like met, and then we talked, and we just were excited, but also we all had the same thing. We were all dealing with people thinking we were crazy. We were all dealing with like, what in the world is happening? Is like, how mad can it go? And just, there was just such a similarity in all of our journeys. So it's like, yeah, the soul families are somehow connecting. So the more that you try and lock us down and quarantine, it's just not going to happen, because it's really tweaking up the skills. And the next level is if you want to turn off the electrics, if you want to turn off the cell phones, if you want to turn off the TVs, I think telepathy would just switch on overnight, because we would find a way. We would find a way.
Think about what we did before. Like when I was growing up, I mean, mobile phones, I owned my first mobile phone when I was 18. And I remember it was the one-to-one phone. Do you remember T-Mobile? And it was that like brick phone in the flat.
Free calls in the evening.
Yeah, the free calls in the evening, and the one that like weighed like a ton of bricks. And it was just like, I remember my brother bought it for like stupid amounts of money. You know, it was like £400-500 back then. It was a big thing, and every Indian family owned a T-Mobile. EE, was it T-Mobile? What was it called? One-to-one. Yeah, one-to-one phone, because it's free calls in the evenings. I mean, it's just like free, you know, this is free. And I remember I used to steal it from my brother during the day, because I used to want to be cool having a mobile at school. So I got named one-to-one at school. Because
Can I ask you actually about the one-to-one? Because did you sell, because they wanted to buy everyone's contract after that, because it got to a point where they realized having all these free evening calls wasn't beneficial, so a lot of people got their contracts bought out? Or did you just kind of, or it wasn't your phone?
Yeah, no, I had it. I just continued with them.
Oh, good for you. Because I know they tried to buy a lot of contracts.
No, I just know I didn't want to sell it. So I've had that number was for many years, and then I gave it up. Then I actually gave it, but then it changed to like EE at that point. So I stayed with them as they sort of grew into all their different names. But I mean, think about it. If we we didn't have mobiles now and the internet, what would we be doing? So that there is a benefit with all this information that's been exchanged and people that we're connecting with. And I look to that. And as long as that we're always in that self-awareness of it not taking over ourselves, because at one point, especially when I felt ill, I was like, I'm on the phone too much. This is too much. And everything that I learned and everything that I started researching, I was so kind of battered mentally that I couldn't even remember the stuff. I couldn't draw upon information that I knew intuitively. I know everything internally that, yeah, that makes sense to me. I know, but I couldn't recall names and stuff. So it's so important for me to get that message out there that people must take self-care. And that's really what I wish for my brothers and sisters, that take self-care. And then you can be strong for yourself first before you're strong for everybody else. So that's really important. But look, 144, and we're going to end on that time, 1440. Om Namo Shivaya. So this is always my intention, that, you know, this reaches people in a positive manner. Carol, you've been an amazing, amazing guest on my show, and I'm definitely going to have you back. I think we could talk for ages. We have done on the phone. And yeah, I'm definitely going to be inviting you to some collabs that I have got in the pipeline. We have a big journey ahead of us, and a lot more to do. So thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.